So hello, all of you. There's 4 of us here, and who knows how many of you where you are. It's good to be together in community. I wasn't sure how many people would show up in person today, and was reminded of the Christian teaching, when 2 or more gather together in my name, there I am. So when 4 of us gather together and many people listen, here we are. Here we are, following our breath together, trying to walk this path together, clarifying our perception and improving our behavior. I'd invite you, since we established the process of following the breath at the abdomen, to just test, can you stay with that during this talk? I don't know if I can. As I share with you some teachings, I will try my best, and you can try your best as you listen to see if you can stay with it or not. And it's just an experiment. What will the result be? Did I stay with it? Did I not? How did it impact my consciousness? We'll see. Who knows? There's no right or wrong outcome. As I mentioned to each of you before, but not to our friends, well, it's been an interesting year for me. I imagine has been for you as well. I've spent most of this year doing intensive meditation retreat. And most of that was in solitude, in solitary retreat in one of our cabins in Lowell, Vermont, and did a number of other retreats, at least one of which was also in one of our cabins for about 17 days. So I've done something like 135 days of meditation retreat this year, which has been most of the year. I think I've been off of retreat for something like 30 days or so. At the end of last year, at the end of 2019, I took some time to see my family. I went home to Massachusetts, where I grew up, and spent some time over the holidays with my family, allotted a relatively large amount of the vacation time that we're given just for that, to spend time with my family. And during that time, I took that opportunity to really plan what was I going to be doing with 2020, this big year of even number 2020. What was I going to be doing with it? What were my intentions? I looked back at 2019 and made big plans for this year, and had it all planned out. Going to run a race in July, 10K, and which books I was going to read, and what things I was going to do with my free time, and what I hope to accomplish. And then 4 days into the new year, January 4th of this year, I was invited to spend an extended period of time in one of our cabins, as I just mentioned, to do a solitary retreat. The plan at that time was that it would be about 60 days, 62 days, something like that. And that was not what I had been planning. The year already, just 4 days in, was not adhering to my plans for what it was going to be. I was not going to be able to do almost any of the things I had planned if I went into solitary retreat. And yet, walking this path, deepening my meditation practice, discovering the truth of these teachings was a deeper purpose than any of the plans that I had thought of with my mind. And so, of course, I decided, yes, I will go into solitary retreat in one of our cabins, and I will make the most of that opportunity to discover the truth behind these teachings. So my retreat, I had already planned to do a 10-day meditation retreat in that month. So I did that. It was in one of our away retreats. We get one retreat a year to do with a different tradition or with a different teacher. And so that was my away retreat, working with a different teacher and a different tradition. And when I came back, very shortly after I came back, I went into solitary retreat for what was intended to be about 60 days. When you do that, in our tradition, it's understood that if it's going well, you might stay longer. You might stay indefinitely. And so that was known to me, that might happen. I might stay past, say, 60 days. But it didn't seem very likely. I'll make a good go of 2 months, 60 days, and we'll see where we're at then. I knew going into the solitary retreat about what was then called Wuhan coronavirus. I'd read about it on the internet. The various websites that I frequented were very concerned about it, but this was still very early. It was late January, which I understand is much earlier than when it got very serious and people were very concerned about it. The timelines are still very fuzzy to me, but fast forward to nearing the end of my period of practice, what was to be. It was March, and there was a retreat going on at the Monastic Academy, and the signs that the virus was becoming more intense became clear. Even though I wasn't really talking to anyone, I was only interacting with Soryu, my meditation teacher, on a one-to-one basis about my practice. So I wasn't really talking to anyone about the news, about the virus, but things started changing at the Monastic Academy. They started putting tape on the doors. There were things on the bulletin boards that said what to do about the virus. People started wearing masks. There was coughing that I could hear when I was in the building. It was clear things were different and that people were concerned, which was a possibility I had anticipated going into the cabin, but that was being realized, that this virus is quite serious. It's come here and things are changing. How exactly, I didn't know, and to a large extent still don't know. This is, as I've said, my second time being out off of our property, save for I did quite a bit of running, which I do to keep in shape, and so I would run off of the property, but in the local area, not really talking to anyone. So this is all new to me. Yes, and so not only had the world outside changed, but the world inside had changed. My practice was going well, and through a series of interesting circumstances, I was offered the chance to continue my retreat, to stay in there for I didn't know how long. Maybe quite a while, maybe a few days, I didn't know, but I was going to keep going. And my main question was, were my parents healthy? And I was assured that my parents were safe and healthy despite the virus. And given that, I decided to continue my retreat. So it ended up being about 100 days in a cabin on our property. Shortly after that, I decided to do a 2-day retreat to keep the momentum of the retreat going. And then there was a 7-day retreat that we did as a group all together. And then very shortly after that, about 3 days after that, they suggested I go back into the cabin. So I did something like a 17-day retreat in one of our cabins after that. So that all adds up to something like 130, 135 days of retreat this year, which before this year, the longest retreat that I'd done was 18 days, which is quite long, but that's a fifth or a sixth of the retreat that I've done this year. So I mention all this to say, first of all, thank you. Thank you for giving me that opportunity to practice, for cooking for me, for keeping the place going. Richard has been an apprentice at the Monastic Academy and is rejoining shortly to become a resident, and directly and indirectly supported me while I was here. And of course, many people have contributed to make my retreat and my practice possible, supporting our organization so that this kind of deep, intensive work can be done. So it feels appropriate now that we're meeting to say thank you. You have given me a gift, whether you knew it or not, and I've benefited from your support, and the fruits of this practice have become clearer at a deeper level. it was a wonderful time. I mean, I was living in nature. I would go for walks or runs every day. There were birds, mice, ants, squirrels, chipmunks, owls, turtles, moose, turkeys. I would go for swims in the pond when it became that season, hikes in the snow when it was winter. The seasons changed while I was in the cabin. It was just tremendously lovely. Many people hear about this kind of thing, and if they haven't done it, they think solitary, cabin retreat, meditation retreat, prison. That sounds like prison. It sounds like hell. Prison, you must not ever leave your building. Well, I left quite a bit to go to the bathroom or get my meals or to go for walks in the woods, and it was just tremendously lovely. I didn't feel alone. That's something a lot of people ask. Do you feel alone? Quite the opposite. Just like here, where I have 3 friends that are with me, and many friends as well, the trees, the bushes, the birds, the insects. They're all here to celebrate with us. We don't cordon ourselves off in a box and pretend that we're separate from the world. We reunite with the world. Say hello, friends, not just the human friends who it's lovely to see, but also the plant life and the animal life and the insects and the sky and the air. That all became very visceral to me. As a child, I was often very sedentary. I would stay inside, would not explore nature. It wasn't something that seemed like a good idea to me in most cases. And I more and more experienced the opposite of that, where I feel deeply connected to all of this lovely blossoming life that manifests in so many forms. That became not just a poem like these words that I'm sharing with you now, but a direct and felt experience, not something foreign, but just astonishingly ordinary and familiar, to be blessed by the presence of grass or the sky or the air or the smells or what have you. And all of that came about not only because of the context of being alone in a cabin in nature, but also because of the deep work of simply trying over and over and over and over and over and over again the exercise that we've already tried of following the breath. Just returning to the breath, not even needing to make it different, which is something that I've done extensively, trying to change the breath to make it more energetic, for example. That's wonderful. I did quite a bit of that, but also just simply attending to the breathing process dramatically alters our experience of consciousness, the universe, in ways that are not supernatural or different, just increasingly ordinary, that we would be astonished to see a tree in front of us. It doesn't look like a different tree, it's just, there's a tree. Wow. We instead of forgetting that there's a tree, that there's life, that there's birds, we again and again remember, there's a bird singing at me right now. Wow. It's so beautiful. Again and again, just very ordinary and yet miraculously beautiful. All of that can be seen in any circumstance, in nature or not, with a cabin or not, living in a monastery or not, simply by repeating again and again the exercise of bringing your awareness to something like the breathing process. For all of the effort that we put into trying to purchase the correct circumstances or the correct objects or the correct living situation through our economy, there's something that we already have that's universal, free, always accessible, so long as we're alive and in this body, which is following the breath. Not even needing to change it. Simply following the breath can open up this miracle of being alive. So, of course, from this gift that you've given me of doing this extensive practice, I feel tremendously grateful and inspired to share that with you and the world, how astonishingly amazing it is that we could receive these teachings simply by following the breath. And while that change has happened within me, another similar change has happened in our organization, where more and more, from what I can tell, correct me if I'm wrong, where we seem to be leaning into this communication of the teaching historically known as Buddhism. We are identifying as a Buddhist organization now that teaches Buddhism, and of course is still inspired by other traditions, but we are planting our feet in the ground and saying, yes, we are Buddhists teaching and practicing Buddhism. And that change happened in our organization. For me, I am more and more encountering the miracle of this practice and am compelled to share it with the world. And of course, as you know, the world has shifted dramatically such that this virus has changed our culture. And I believe from meeting you and speaking with you many times since I've come out, that the world at large, our culture, our society, our species is ready to hear this message that I'm sharing with you and that our organization is sharing with the world, of whether you call it spirituality or Buddhism or the path, whatever you choose. It seems to me that humanity, whether it's you in particular or our species at large, is finally, to some degree, ready, willing, interested, able to hear, yes, maybe there is something to this teaching, to this practice that would be of benefit to me and the world. Does that all seem true, Richard?
It seems true that there's advocacy and generosity.
Yeah. But our organization has shifted more to Buddhism, and perhaps the world has changed.
I don't have as long a view as you do.
Yeah.
But I would, in general, say, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I think before, of course, we've been inspired by many traditions, some of which are not Buddhist. So that's a part of our DNA, as it were. But before, we were more identifying as non-sectarian. And of course, we've taught secular mindfulness in schools, for example, not even remotely approaching spirituality, let alone Buddhism. But at this time, we are saying, yes, we are Buddhists, and we teach Buddhism, we practice Buddhism. And to me, having done the work that I've done, walked the path that I have walked, that is very exciting news, worth celebrating, that not only are we internally ready to share Buddhism and fully own that, but also, astonishingly, there are people in the world that want to hear that really want to hear that are just desperate to hear that. I've had many conversations with friends and family members, with students, with acquaintances over the past month when I have not been in practice, intensive practice, and everyone that I've talked to is eager and excited and happy in their own way, of course, but truly to hear these teachings, to hear about it. Is there something more than what I've been taught that might help me live a good life? If so, please give it to me. That's what I hear and see when I meet with people and speak with people. And of course, we've been blessed in our community, in yourselves, that many of us have already been at that point of desperately, eagerly seeking the teachings. It's not that there weren't people like that before, but there's just a renewed vigor, fervor, desire to truly encounter a teaching, if there is such a thing as a teaching. And I believe that this is the basic question that we need to ask ourselves. Having been given the gift of encountering a spiritual teaching, whether it be Buddhism or Christianity or Judaism or Islam or simply meeting a modern shaman, someone who has some kind of wisdom that doesn't fit neatly in a box. The question is this true? Is there such a thing as a teaching? Is this teaching real? Can it really help me? Is this valid? Is this beneficial? And we have to really ask that question, deeply ask that question, and put our lives on the line. It's as if we're being asked to make a bet, and you can only put all of your money into the bet or none of your money. What most of us try to do is half-heartedly sort of put some money into it and see, maybe is this real? And there's benefit to that. That's valid. That's useful. But I'd suggest at this time, at this place in our lives and in this world, we really need to ask ourselves, is this a true teaching? Is this valid? Is this beneficial? Is this useful? And if it is, to put all of our money, to put all of our life energy, to put everything on the line for that, really going for it. And if it's not, walk away. It's not worth it. If this isn't real, let's leave. Like, there are many things I could be doing with my time other than, sitting here talking at you. I don't want to talk at people that's, like just on its own. I don't want to talk at people for the sake of talking at people. I want to, if there is a teaching, I wish to encounter it, to live it, practice it, and share it, make it the basis of my life. And if not, there's any number of things we could be doing. So I'd ask that, I'd suggest that each of us, the question we're being presented with, through whether you look at it through world circumstances or our own life situation or our own just eager, desperate investigation, it's time for us to really look at, are these teachings true? Is this real? Will this benefit me? Is this backed up by the universe, by the trees, by the birds, the mosquitoes? Is this real? If it's real, let me give my life to it. I will practice this as hard as I can in whatever way I am able at this time. Doesn't mean you have to go join a monastery. There's a householder life in Buddhism, for example. You can either be a householder or a monastic. Those are the two traditional ways of walking the path of Buddhism that are both valid. They both have established ways to do it. It's not that one is better than the other, but to truly do it. Richard and I are choosing, at least for this time, to walk the monastic path. Perhaps you're choosing to walk the householder path. It's not that I'm better than you or you're better than me. They're just different paths. But if we believe it's real, let's do it. Let's fully do it. And if we think it's not real, if we have reservations, doubts, concerns that seem insoluble, that seem, for example, we follow the breath again and again for days on end, and it gets nowhere, there's no benefit, then what are we doing? It's just made up. It's a lie. We should not give any more time or energy to it. So it's time, I think, for us as individuals and for our civilization to really ask this question. Is this real? Is there a teaching that is not limited by my own failings, but has a truth beyond the human mind? Is there something that can give me a happiness that's not dependent on conditions? Is there a way I can serve all life beyond what I've been told I should be doing with my life, getting this particular job or that particular skill? Is there some way I can benefit all beings in all times and all places, in all universes? Is that true? If so, yes, I want that happiness. I want to be of service that deeply. And if not, stop lying to me. Stop telling me about these lies. I have other things I could be doing with my time. So if we think that this path is not real, then any number of the things that we might do with our daily lives make sense. It makes sense to veg out and watch movies or listen to music or, dull our senses with various drugs and alcohol and, have, casual interactions with people that have no real depth or meaning or purpose, but are simply for momentary pleasure. All of that makes sense. It's valid. It's good if there is no deeper teaching about what life means and what death means and what this time on earth is about. But if there is such a teaching, the things that we ordinarily spend our time with, that we ordinarily occupy our lives with, make no sense. It doesn't make sense to feed an economy that destroys life on earth. It doesn't make sense to spend our time in a meaningless job that hurts others, which is something that many people I know do. I don't know what you do with your lives, but I know many people who are spending time either neutrally, which means that they're wasting their time, or even worse, they're wasting their time and hurting other people while they do it. So many of the choices that we make with our lives make complete sense.
Homeless shelter.
Homeless shelter. You run one or live in one?
I work for one.
Work for one. Yes. See, this is wonderful. This is of benefit. Many people, of course, do that, but many people also live lives that do not benefit others. Or no, of course.
I'm very lucky this minute.
Exactly. Well, and perhaps more than lucky, you have made choices that have led to that you clearly see I should benefit others and have aligned your life accordingly. Many people don't make those choices, so I celebrate that you've made those choices. But as I've said, not only do we need to ask this question individually with our lives, but we need to ask it as a species, as a civilization. What are we doing? Because even if we individually are doing good with our lives, which I think I am, I think you are, you think you are, maybe you think I am, I don't know. Most people, in fact, think that what they're doing with their lives is good. And yet, when we look at the facts, humanity as a whole is destroying the planet, is destroying species, is risking not only our lives, but the whole planet's life for our pleasure, our comfort, our safety, our delusion. All of that makes complete sense if there is no spiritual teaching, and makes no sense if a spiritual teaching is real. And so that is really the question that's been driving me trying to follow the breath for days. If this is real, I should follow my breath all day long, striving to cut off the thinking that takes me away from it. When you're in that kind of a container of solitary practice, it makes sense to learn the skill of not thinking. It's not that you try to never think again. I'm thinking a lot as I give this talk to you. I think a lot with my free time, but it's been useful to me to try to gain the skill of not thinking, and the setting of doing extended solitary retreat is the perfect chance to cultivate that skill. If you're living even in a monastery, it can be difficult when you have to balance our books or have a meeting of some kind to practice not thinking. But when you meditate extensively, for example, on a retreat, or in my case, a solitary extended cabin retreat, that's a good time to practice the skill of not thinking. I mention this because many people think that meditation is just about not thinking, and that's an oversimplification. There's a reason that people think that, because it's good to learn the skill of not thinking. But that doesn't mean that you can't think when you're meditating, or that if you are thinking, you're bad, or, I would suggest even if you are living the life as a householder, that it makes more sense to have techniques that involve thinking, like cultivating loving kindness or gratitude, or thinking analytically about your ethics, for example. Those are excellent meditation techniques, and it's hard to do ones that involve not thinking when you don't have the chance to do that all day, every day, for an extended period of time in more or less complete solitude. That is a good environment to learn the skill of not thinking. if you're not in that circumstance, it's much harder and I would argue less useful. And that doesn't mean there are many other good things that are useful to do with that time. So, this is really the basic question. Each of us here, to some extent, in some shape or form, has encountered some spiritual teaching, whether it's Buddhism or another teaching, that has brought us here, that has made us think maybe it's a good idea to spend my Sunday afternoon practicing meditation with others. Something that we heard in our life brought us here, and that, I'd suggest, was a spiritual teaching, and that it's important that we look very closely in our own experience whether these teachings seem to be of benefit or not. If they are true, if they benefit me, if they benefit others, then let's put all of our money on the table. Let's put all of our energy into it. Let's take it as far as we can and do it completely, whether that's in a monastery or in a household. They're both valid. Let's just do it completely. Put everything that we have into it, cutting away everything that's not that, because everything else is superfluous if it's real. That doesn't mean you have to never enjoy life or something, or there's any number of ways you could misunderstand that, but I'm saying let's make it the basis of our life if it's real. Let's do this together. And if we find, after a genuine attempt to investigate this question, that it's not real, that you think I, for example, or others are mistaken or lying to you or just weird or something, I don't know, then drop it. There's better things we could do with our time if it's not real. If we're going to make something up, let's make art or music or stories. I love literature. Let's just write. I could spend the rest of my life writing the great American novel if this isn't real. That would be wonderful. I would have a great time doing that. It's not even bad. That's a lovely use of time. I would go do something like that if this weren't real. And yet, to me, as I listen to my teacher, as I read various scriptures, as I put those teachings into practice, again and again, I personally find they said I would be happier if I followed my breath. I seem to be happier. Okay, that's good information. I'm going to double down and follow my breath now. Here we go. And whatever experiment I run from the teachings that I encounter, again and again, when I really put my energy into that investigation, it seems to show, yes, these are teachings that are real and beneficial. And so I'm putting all of my energy and time and attention and care into really going for it. But each of us has to question this for ourselves as individuals, and I would suggest again that we have to do this as a species now. Even if just the four of us or every single individual in our community, our extended community in multiple locations, does this work individually and comes to the same conclusion, this is worth doing, I'm going to give all of my energy to it, that's still not enough. We still have to somehow find a way to have, as a species, the same kind of realization arise where we encounter this isn't working, what we're doing is bad, and we need to change. A moment of clarity, not only as individuals, but as a species. So we, of course, need to do our part by asking this question fully with our own lives, and we'll spend some time doing that together tonight. But somehow, it can't just be the four of us, or however many people are listening here, or however many locations we have. Somehow, it has to be even bigger than any number of individuals. It has to be a movement, not just of one culture, but the whole species somehow to turn around and stop destroying the planet. That's what needs to happen. And somehow, just this simple act of sitting outside with friends, following the breath, might just be our next step to doing that. Maybe. We can pray. Maybe this is our best shot at giving forth to a life that will somehow realize a world in which humanity no longer destroys life on earth, and we can instead put our energy into finding happiness that doesn't depend on conditions, circumstances, or the destruction of others. That would be good if we did that together. Yes. So, with that as a context, as a basis, we're going to be using the breath tonight. The breath is our place of work, where we will roll up our sleeves and test, are these teachings real? Am I finding a new kind of happiness simply from again and again returning my awareness to the breathing and staying with it? And while this is an extremely simple practice that may even seem boring at times, I'm going to share with you a few of the ways that I have found to both spice it up, make it more interesting than you may have experienced in the past, certainly than I had experienced before, and also to not only that it's more interesting for us, but that it might just help us more deeply sink our teeth into this question of, is this real or not? Is this of benefit or not? That by finding new ways to do this simple exercise of staying with the breath, we can ask this question more deeply and from different angles as well. So this place of work in the abdominal area will be the basis of our experiments tonight, and yet we'll find several ways of doing that, and towards the end of this time together tonight we can discuss what we found. Did this seem to be real? Did this seem to be beneficial? Should I base my life on this? How will we as a species turn around? So let's earnestly give this a go together. We'll try to work with the breath and see, does this help me? Does this seem true? Does it work? Should I base my life on this teaching?